The studio fell quiet. Karoline Leavitt on live television pointed her finger and yelled, "Sit down, boy!" Millions of Americans stood in shock. Social media ignited immediately. But what they did next shocked the whole country. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young revolution leader of Burkina Faso, didn't yell back. He didn't quarrel. He didn't insult her. But he did stand firm, serene, and unwavering. And with a few forceful sentences, he capsized the entire argument and made an entire nation question dignity, respect, and humanity. It was a Tuesday night in Manhattan. Tens of millions of viewers had watched, anticipating a standard, fiery political debate. But what happened that evening was far from routine. Captain Traoré had been called to describe African independence and America's place in West Africa. Across from him was Karoline Leavitt, a veteran U.S. political spokesperson with a quick wit and incessant arguments. Producers had guaranteed a civilized exchange, but one sentence altered everything. While Traoré calmly outlined his country's position on Western intervention, Karoline burst out, leaning forward, jabbing her finger and snapping, "Sit down." Boy. The studio was paralyzed. Gasps filled the room. In a matter of seconds, Twitter was on fire. Hashtags trended, and millions hung on their screens. No one could imagine what Traoré was going to do next. He did not yell. He did not lose control. Instead, he stood up deliberately, his stance unyielding, his eyes unwavering. In a soft but authoritative voice, he said, "I am from a land where boys are compelled to become men much earlier than they can dream." The crowd was silent. Then, meeting Karoline's eyes, he went on, "You may call me boy in your theater, but where I am from, boys carry nations on their backs." The whole studio was entranced by his words. He started to tell his tale, losing his father under an open sky, no cameras, no headlines, but only the soft tears of his mother. He told about learning in darkness, because the lights never returned on after colonialism departed. Then he inquired, "When you say, 'Sit down, boy,' do you address the boy who saw his village burn? The boy who learned to lead because no one else remained?" Karoline's confidence faltered. The audience remained immobile, knowing this was not merely a debate. It was an observation of human survival. Suddenly, a U.S. war veteran decorated on the panel arose. He put his hand over his heart and said, "He is right. This isn't debate. This is humiliation." He walked across the stage, extended his hand to Captain Traoré, and the two men shook hands. The audience erupted in applause, not out of pity, but out of deep respect. Karoline, desperate to recover, snapped, "Oh, so now we're pretending he's a saint?" Traoré remained calm. "It's not about sainthood," he said softly. "It's about humanity." The energy in the room shifted entirely. The host asked Captain Traoré to address the millions of Americans at home. We all anticipated a passionate soundbite, but he spoke gently. His voice weighed with significance. "You don't need to know where Burkina Faso is to learn about dignity. You simply have to know what it is like to be invisible." The room went quiet. It was no longer just about Africa. It was about every unseen person, every unheard voice, everywhere. Then, rising from the third row, an old black woman stood up. Her hands shook a little as she spoke. "I didn't come here to speak," she whispered, "but I have to say this." Tears streamed down her face as she gazed at Captain Traoré. "My son served in Afghanistan. He returned home in a box, and even wearing a uniform, they still said boy to him." Her voice broke as she went on. "When you talked, it was like my son stood up again." No one applauded. No one stood up. It was the sort of silence reserved for truths too profound to applaud. Karoline, who had been so proud and above reproof, now sat motionless, her pride destroyed. Her words counted for nothing in the light of naked humanity. And as the crowd stood to applaud slowly, their clapping was not only for Captain Traoré, it was for all silenced voices, unseen battles, and every individual who had ever borne the burden of a nation on their shoulders. That evening, the debate was over, but the discussion had only just started.